The first Raggedy Ann doll was stitched into life in 1915 in the quiet suburbs of Indianapolis, Indiana by Johnny Gruelles. Gruelles was a prominent cartoonist and political satirist of his day, penning comics for the Indianapolis Star before bittersweet inspiration led him off the page and into the sewing parlor. The story goes that Gruelles' 14-year-old daughter, Marcella, became gravely ill after receiving a vaccination for smallpox in a world before organizations like the CDC existed to monitor vaccine safety. To keep her spirits up, Johnny told stories at her bedside, using an old rag doll he found in an attic. The doll was unremarkable, with no facial features save for its button eyes, so Johnny spruced it up, adding red yarn hair, drawing a smile, and its signature triangle nose. He named the doll Raggedy Ann, combining the names of two of his favorite poems, The Raggedy Man and Little Orphaned Annie, the latter of which was about an orphan girl who lives with an adopted family and tells spooky tales that end with a misbehaving child being taken away by goblins.
And they snatched her through the ceiling, for she knowed what she's about. And the goblins will get you if you don't watch out.
Little did Gruelles know, his creation would become an icon of horror that would outlive its creator, only becoming more relevant as the next century rolled by. I've covered the screen version of Annabelle at length in several other videos on this channel, primarily when I did my episode on Malthus, the demonic entity that associates itself with the doll in the Conjuring movies. But the real Annabelle, the true life story that inspired the cinematic plaything that you positively do not want released from its plexiglass prison, is stitched with its own brand of disquieting horror.
Tonight, demon doll fever gripping the internet.
Bro, every time I get by this doll, like I feel like they're gonna... No, go outside.
Are we safe here with the doll?
As safe as one can be, right? I mean, we are taking precautions.
He wakes up with a start, he said, my God, what a nightmare. I dreamt that doll was strangling me.
This is the worst thing in here. It's that doll that has done bad harm on a lot of people.
Oh my God.
She's right there, Chris.
Welcome to Horror History. In case you need a refresher, the story of a possessed doll terrorizing young women in their own home is the opening scene of the first film in the Conjuring franchise. And apart from being a table setter for the cinematic horrors that come later in that film, its cold open was also the world's introduction to a porcelain doll with an eerily vacant stare named Annabelle. A doll that would become synonymous for demonic evil after launching its own series of spin-off films, deepening an already healthy stock of doll-centric mayhem first spawned by the likes of Chucky, Tunneler, and Billy the Puppet. I just can't believe that when the Annabelle Jigsaw crossover was announced, this is what it ended up being. Now, you may think you know this story. A haunted doll, a few bumps in the night, Ed and Lorraine Warren swoop in with some rosary beads and slap on a warning label, roll credits. But the actual case is murkier. The most interesting part is what we still don't know. Was it all a hoax, a hallucination, mass hysteria, or can an object really be cursed?
Everything you see in here is either haunted, cursed, or been used in some sort of ritualistic practice. Nothing's a toy, not even the toys.
But in order to truly unravel the stitching of the haunted doll's infamous lineage, from the demonic lore to the billion-dollar horror franchise to the unexplained newsworthy incidents that came after, we have to follow the thread back to 1915 when a young girl allegedly became its first victim. Marcella Gruelles' excitement over the revitalized doll and the fantastical stories her father told kept the pain of her illness at bay for a time. In September of 1915, Johnny Gruelles patented the design of the doll that brought his daughter so much joy. But like the goblins in the story that inspired the doll's name, death came to take the young girl from her family just 2 months later, on November 8th, 1915, in Wilton, Connecticut. Legend says that Johnny, saddled with grief at the loss of his daughter, turned the doll into his project, regarding it with the same reverence as his own flesh and blood offspring. He would go on to write a series of children's books with Raggedy Ann and her brother, Andy, at the center of each tale, hoping to spread the same good cheer to other children that Marcella enjoyed before she succumbed to her illness. The details surrounding the doll's creation, and its connection to Marcella in the weeks before she passed, have long been debated and flat out dismissed by skeptical historians who say that the story is more myth than fact. But Gruelles' own granddaughter, Joni, believes this version of the events to be mostly accurate, even if she can't prove every detail. She never actually knew her grandfather.
He died quite a few years before I was born, but I feel like I know him through his books and his stories and some family history.
But it would be strange if they changed the story to make it look more like he was monetizing his daughter's suffering. Embellishment or not, the story does share an eerie detail with its cinematic descendant 102 years later. Both Johnny Gruelles and the fictional doll maker Samuel Mullins in Annabelle creation are mourning young daughters who died tragically at a young age. Gruelles himself also met an early end, dying unexpectedly of heart failure at the age of 57, just weeks after narrowly winning a lawsuit to maintain the creative rights to the Raggedy Ann name and brand in 1938. Maybe Marcella's spirit wasn't too happy about the story of her painful demise being used to sell dolls and books after all. In the wake of the ragdoll's unlikely rise to prominence, both father and daughter had been laid to rest under bizarre circumstances. But it would take another 15 years before Raggedy Ann would be linked to any attacks of a violent variety. This video is sponsored by Factor. How do you know when a horror movie franchise is working? When people keep showing up to the point that they run out of ideas for sequels. And how do you know when a YouTube brand deal is working? When they keep hiring me to make them and I'm running out of ways to tell you how much people love Factor. I don't even need to tell you about how their meals are delivered fresh to your door and never frozen. Why should I even bother telling you about how the flavors make you feel like you're at a restaurant because they were prepared with real quality ingredients by a real chef in a real kitchen? The fact that you are seeing this again is proof enough. Everyone who tries Factor becomes a fan, and like a great horror franchise, we're coming back for sequel after sequel after sequel. So thankfully, they've got a lot of options to choose from, with 50 nutritious meal options each week. Just heat, peel, and enjoy. I probably don't even have to tell you about the special deal that they give to CZsWorld viewers, but I will anyway. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code CZFB50 to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. That's code CZFB50 at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free breakfast for 1 year. Maine has always carried a certain dark weight in the imagination. Fog-drenched forests, rocky coastlines, and haunted lighthouses. This is Stephen King country after all. A place where the veil feels thinner. Or so I've heard. I've never been to Maine. On an ordinary night in Portland in May of 1953, 40-year-old Charlotte Adams and her 12-year-old daughter, Caroline, were found dead inside of their blood-flecked apartment. Both of their throats had been slashed with a carving knife. According to the Boston Evening American, defensive wounds on the victims told a harrowing tale of a mother and daughter engaged in a terrific struggle for life. I'm assuming the article's author is using the archaic definition of the word, meaning causing terror. The suspect was Douglas P. Adams, the father of the family. By all accounts, a quiet man. No history of violence, no criminal record, no reports of mental illness, and no motive. When questioned by the police, the former Army major responded with a cryptic line: "Legally, I am guilty, but morally, that's a different story." Which legally is not a great defense, and morally is pretty questionable, in my opinion. He refused to explain further, saying only that he'd been plotting to do it for 3 days, with no idea as to why he felt a sudden urge to harm his loved ones. The seemingly random nature of the murders would send shockwaves through any small town, but the residents of Portland, Maine had their blood chilled a few degrees colder after details from the crime scene were released by the press. Sitting in the same room as Caroline's body, officers found a life-sized Raggedy Ann doll placed neatly in a chair. The doll had not been damaged, tossed aside, or bloodied. It had been set there, intentionally, just a few feet away from the youngest victim, as if it had watched the murder unfold. As if it had been silently controlling the killer, keeping watch throughout this heinous act. Psychologists might write this detail off as symbolic, a child's toy caught in the emotional blast radius of domestic tragedy. But some imaginative commentators, paranormal investigators, demonologists, and the like might call the doll something else entirely, a conduit. After all, Douglas Adams spoke like someone under the influence of something not quite of this world. His eerie phrasing, the lack of motive, the mechanical planning, and the remorseless tone all echoed the kind of behavior found in possession cases. Cases where killers claimed that they were compelled by a force they couldn't name or control. I have to wonder if anyone thought to check if old Douglas was under the influence of something other than demons or evil spirits or whatever. Reactions to the incident were clear though. The doll's influence had veered from an innocent tragedy into something macabre, a silent witness to the horror, or perhaps an accomplice to the bloody act itself. It depends on what you believe. My initial thought was that maybe people in the 1900s were more susceptible to believing in the paranormal, but according to British historian Owen Davies, Gallup polls suggest that in the last 75 years, belief in ghosts has risen from 10% to nearly 40%, which could explain why Annabelle's infamy has only grown over the years, and might explain some other stuff too. So even if they were in the vast minority, the whispers started to circulate. Was Raggedy Ann really just a toy? Or was something living inside the doll? Something ancient, something evil? Questions like these would have no doubt made the doll's creator roll in his grave. But 17 years later, such questions bubbled up again thanks to a strange case involving another Raggedy Ann doll inside of a small apartment in Hartford, Connecticut. This time, the doll wouldn't just be found at the scene of a crime, she'd be at the center of it. The year was 1970, a moment where horror history overlapped with American history, thanks to an era marked by imagined devils of all stripes. Accused Satan worshippers at Black Sabbath had just released their first album, filling the airwaves with distorted guitar riffs and occult imagery that sent parents into a moral panic. And in the wake of the recent Charles Manson crimes, every long-haired, barefoot hitchhiker was suddenly a potential cultist. But the most insidious evil of the day was sitting quietly in a nondescript apartment in Hartford, Connecticut, cradled in the arms of a 28-year-old nursing student named Donna Jennings, a vintage Raggedy Ann doll. The doll was a birthday gift from Donna's mother. To the untrained eye, it was harmless, a relic of Americana, plucked from a bygone era where toys were simple and childhood innocence was preserved inside a plush package of felt and fluff. But there was a darkness hiding just behind the doll's stitched-on smile and buttoned eyes. Just days after taking the doll home, Donna reported strange happenings inside of her apartment. Cold drafts without open windows, shuffling sounds and whispers at night, notes scrawled in childish handwriting that she couldn't explain. At first, she thought it might all be in her head, byproducts of a sleep-deprived mind and a grueling course load that left the nurse in training little time for anything outside of a textbook. But Donna wasn't alone. Soon, her roommate, fellow nurse Angie Tapleton, and Angie's fiance, Lou Carlo, shared similar experiences. The doll seemed to move on its own, jumping from room to room when the girls were away, with limbs arranged in disturbing postures. And some of the notes even mentioned Lou by name, ominous messages that said, "Help, Lou." Help from what or who wasn't made clear, but the intention was obvious. The words were meant to elicit fear. Or, depending on what you believe, a prank by Donna and Angie. But we won't go into that because it's not as fun. Later, when the doll's hands were found smeared in a thick red fluid that looked hauntingly close to human blood, Donna and her roommate decided to bring in outside help and called a psychic.
He gets up, he looks at the doll in the chair, picks it up, and throws it right across the room. "You're nothing but a rag doll. You couldn't hurt anyone." With that, Tony, 7 psychic slashes appear on his body. These slashes come from nowheres. The blood came right through his shirt.
No one ever suspects the rag doll until the bleeding starts. But Ed Warren, the real-life renowned paranormal investigator, knew better. By the time he and his wife, Lorraine, a supposed clairvoyant, arrived at the modest apartment on Glen Road, the doll was allegedly terrorizing the trio of young adults.
We learned from her that a 7-year-old girl named Annabelle Higgins had died in this apartment. She was lonely and took a liking to my doll.
The couple was summoned to the home in 1970 by an Episcopal priest, basically a Christian denomination that combines elements of Catholic and Protestant beliefs. When they arrived, the case had already spiraled into one of the most disturbing hauntings that the Warrens would ever face. Donna Jennings and Angie Tapleton described weeks of mounting dread, courtesy of the red-haired rag doll. Missing objects reappearing in strange places, eerie notes written in a child's scrawl, footsteps when no one else was home. And, most troubling of all, the doll seems to move from room to room. Its posture changed ever so slightly, a different position every time the nurses returned from their shifts at the hospital. A medium facilitated a seance in the apartment, hoping to contact the spirit they believed had taken up residence inside the doll. Once contact was made, the spirit was keen to set the record straight. It claimed to be the spirit of a 7-year-old Annabelle Higgins, a young girl who died on the property years before the apartment building broke ground. The dead girl supposedly used to play in the fields where the building now stood and move the Raggedy Ann doll around, hoping to get Donna and Angie's attention. According to the medium, the spirit said that it had no malicious intent. She was just lonely. All she wanted was someone to play with.
When we heard this, we felt really sorry for her. I mean, we're nurses, we help people. So we gave her permission to move into the doll.
Renaming the doll Annabelle, the nurses embraced their new roommate, treating it as if it was a living, breathing child. They brought Annabelle gifts and jewelry, included it in conversation, and even sat the doll at their dining table for breakfast each morning. This all probably looked kinda schizo if they ever had people over. I can't help but be reminded of the so-called cat lady from Terrifier 1. At night, they took it to bed, cradling the doll, happy to oblige its desire for attention. That is, until the nightmares began. Not long after the seance and the girl's consent to the spirit's wishes, Angie's fiance, Lou, complained of recurring nightmares. Where the nurses felt compassion and even sadness for the doll, Lou felt apprehension, anger, and fear. When Ed Warren asked him about his experience, Lou said, "I didn't like the doll, and the doll didn't like me right back." Lou's distaste for Annabelle meant less trips to his girlfriend's apartment, which I can relate to because I had an ex whose roommate had an evil cat, who, much like Annabelle, was not as cute as said roommate seemed to believe it was. But the doll still managed to worm its way into Lou's mind when he slept. He complained of vivid nightmares where the doll strangled him in his sleep, only to wake up in fright with little cotton hands actually wrapped around his throat, squeezing the life out of him before it disappeared like a wisp of smoke as he struggled to pry the doll from his windpipe. This could be explained logically. Those who saw my Freddy Krueger episode may remember me talking about hypnagogic hallucinations that occur right before you fall asleep. The opposite also exists. Hypnopompic hallucinations are generally harmless hallucinations that occur right as a person wakes up. But that wouldn't explain the next evolution of the haunting, the scratches. Deep and bloody claw marks gouged into his chest, which again is kind of like the evil cat, or Freddy Krueger. This psychic attack took place inside the girl's apartment after Lou heard strange noises coming from Donna's bedroom, went inside to investigate, and found the doll stuffed into a corner on the floor. As he moved closer, he suddenly doubled over in pain, then ran into the living room screaming, unveiling his fresh chest wounds to both Donna and Angie. Before the blood dried and the wounds scabbed over, the trio made for the nearest church, consulting a priest who then called Ed and Lorraine Warren. When the Warrens arrived on the scene and heard the couple's hair-raising account, they offered a sobering diagnosis. There was no Annabelle, only a demonic spirit that tricked the girls into believing that it was the ghost of a little girl.
So the doll was never possessed?
No, it was used as a conduit. It was moved around to give the impression of possession. Demonic spirits don't possess things. They possess people. It wanted to get inside of you.
Realizing the danger posed by the doll, not just to Donna and Angie, but to anyone in its presence, the Warrens took Annabelle home with them. But even in the backseat of the car, the doll wasted no time unleashing its soft-bodied brand of evil on its new wardens. Ed claimed the brakes and power steering failed multiple times during the drive, with the car verging on collision until he pulled over and doused Annabelle in holy water as part of a roadside blessing. I always find it hilarious how holy water is just like the one-stop solution to anything evil in these stories. You would think the church would just have firefighter priests on standby just blasting the stuff. Once home, the Warrens hatched a plan to blunt Annabelle's wicked power. Destroying the doll wasn't an option. They'd only damage the vessel, setting free the demonic entity inside to latch on to something or someone else. The only solution was containment. So they built a glass cabinet, blessed by men of the church, and sealed the doll under permanent lock and key. If you're watching this, you've probably seen it all before in The Conjuring. But the full account of the Annabelle case is documented in chilling detail in The Demonologist by Gerald Brittle, a comprehensive biography and career retrospective that traces Ed and Lorraine Warren's paranormal careers until the book's publication in 1980. While the Annabelle case did receive some attention in the press, and the Warrens themselves were the subject of a 1972 cover story in Connecticut Magazine, The Demonologist marked the first time that Ed and Lorraine shared the complete story of Annabelle with the public, spilling all of the stuffing on a case that still haunts to this day. Some of the more eye-opening details from the book that never got the silver screen treatment include anecdotes about the Annabelle doll levitating in Ed Warren's office as animalistic growls echoed through the room, a police detective who worked with Ed on a witchcraft-related murder bolting out of the Warren home, white-faced with fear after a brief encounter with the doll, and a mysterious black cat that would materialize beside the doll, stalking across the floor and nuzzling other occult items in the Warrens' possession before melting into shadow, which is actually still less evil than my ex's roommate's cat. These other occult artifacts would later populate the Warrens' museum in Monroe, Connecticut, along with the Annabelle doll itself, still trapped inside of its glass prison. This mostly seemed to keep the terror at bay. However, I will mention one story that has persisted over the years. Supposedly, in the 1980s, a college student came to the museum and got a little too comfortable disrespecting the evil that resided there.
A group of college students came one day. One of them said this is nothing but a bunch of bunk. I don't believe in it. He went over to the Raggedy Ann doll, which is in a case, knocking on it, said, this doll can't do anything. I dare it right now to put slashes on me. I put him out of the building. Less than 3 hours later, that boy was dead. His girlfriend, who had been with him on a motorcycle, said he was laughing about the doll, smashed into a tree, head on, was killed instantly. His girlfriend was in a hospital for over a year.
However, there doesn't appear to be any evidence to suggest that this ever actually happened, which didn't help with the persistent accusations that the couple were making it all up for attention and profit. And for an investigative team whose livelihood hinged entirely on word of mouth and a pristine reputation, there was only one force more haunting than any spirit: the doubt of a non-believer. Some of these skeptics even claim to have found the inspiration for Ed and Lorraine's stack of pareidolia lies. Just like the demon that tried to fool a couple of nurses with a sob story about a lonely ghost, the Warrens were accused of their own deception, of weaving fiction from fear, of turning hauntings into headlines and dollar signs, long before Annabelle in the Conjuring franchise struck cinematic gold. There was even speculation that the Annabelle story was lifted wholesale from an episode of The Twilight Zone, a story about Talkie Tina, a young girl's killer doll, which aired in November of 1963, a full 7 years before the Warren case. In the episode, the girl's mother was named Annabelle.
And I'm going to get rid of you.
You wouldn't dare.
Wouldn't I?
Annabelle would hate you, Castee would hate you, and I would hate you.
The Demonologist book helped legitimize their cause in the eyes of some by drowning out the loudest voices of dissension, which claimed that the Warrens were merely good storytellers who preyed on the superstitious and simple-minded to make a buck. As long as we talked about haunted houses and ghosts, people were delighted. When we had to mention demonic spirits, demonology, the devil, or worse, if we brought up Christ, or priests, or religion, a swell of animosity rose up from the audience, as though someone had thrown a switch. The hostility was sometimes so overwhelming we could hardly go on. Everyone was searching for the truth, except it had to be a certain kind of truth that conformed to the prejudices of the day. Whether you buy into their tales or think that it's all just smoke and mirrors, what's undeniable is the Warrens' flair for paranormal pageantry, a lucrative skill that Hollywood was eager to exploit. Cue the rocking chair. With the Warrens now woven into the fabric of pop culture and the demonologists serving as their unofficial gospel, it was only a matter of time before Hollywood came knocking.
All night long, just like that.
Only it didn't just knock, it kicked the dang door right off its hinges. But what exactly did Tinseltown get right? And what got lost in translation? We already covered the story of the two nurses and the name Annabelle Higgins, both of which came directly from the original account. So far, the script seems faithful, but the most glaring change was the doll itself. The real Annabelle's soft, smiling face was too cutesy for director James Wan's liking. So, the reimagined story carved out a nightmare vision of cracked porcelain, a more realistic face, blood-red lips, and glassy, lifeless eyes, with a body wrapped in a ruffled Victorian dress that'd be right at home in a 19th century funeral parlor. Each of these flourishes are made all the more terrifying when you consider our hardwired tendency to attribute human qualities to inanimate objects, also known as pareidolia. It's a human trait that has been used to sell cars, create intrigue in art, and, as it pertains to The Conjuring, give kids nightmares. Which makes dolls especially potent emotional proxies, because they're actually designed to look like us. And that's where the trouble starts, in the uncanny valley. When a non-human object begins to appear more human, it starts to look more and more cute, like the Raggedy Ann doll. But if it gets too realistic, it drops off and becomes incredibly creepy, before rebounding as it gets close to 100% realism. This drop-off is called the uncanny valley. This primal glitch in the human brain is why nearly 9.1 million Americans report a clinical phobia of dolls. Still, the choice to redesign wasn't entirely creative. Remember when I said that Johnny Gruelles filed a patent on his doll idea? Legal concerns played just as big a role in what ended up on screen. Hasbro's Raggedy Ann brand is protected by trademark and copyright protections. While copyright alone might not have posed a major issue, since the film isn't directly competing with doll sales, when you consider that the doll is being portrayed as an evil beacon for demonic activity that nearly concusses a child, you step into the territory of trademark delusion, the unauthorized use of a trademark in a way that could tarnish its reputation or weaken its distinctiveness. And with the Conjuring franchise, Warner Brothers was hoping to create some horror movie nightmares and avoid any legal nightmares. So the creative team gave the doll a facelift that would sidestep infringement and dial up the fear. There's probably some way they would have found to make the original Annabelle doll look creepy with the right lighting and the right music, but the updated look also catered to the appeal of the director.
I have an affection for ventriloquist puppets, and so that's what Annabelle became. And I think what makes ventriloquist puppets creepy and scary is not the fact that they chase you with knives in their hands and stuff like that. It's the fact that all they have to do is just sit there on the chair, and you walk by it at night to go get a drink, and you think to yourself, did that thing just look at me?
If you do think an evil doll is following you with its eyes, the Annabelle series offers a clear set of instructions. Grab a crucifix, call a priest, and just don't touch anything.
What else did you touch?
The film's theology is streamlined, using a set of very Catholic horror tropes popularized by The Exorcist. A character with a wavering faith, an encounter with a big scary demon invisible to the human eye, rinse with holy water, and repeat. But the Warrens' real-life approach wasn't nearly so tidy. Yes, they were devout Catholics, but their spiritual toolbox was far more eclectic. They blended traditional faith with folk rituals, ghost lore, psychic impressions, protective medallions, and even the occasional whispered reference to voodoo and hoodoo traditions. Hollywood, of course, trimmed that complexity. In the film's default to Christian iconography that would be widely recognized in the Western world. Because if there's one thing that movie execs fear more than eternal damnation, it's losing their audience with lore that they don't understand. And it's safe to say that worked. The Conjuring opened in 2013 and made over $300 million. With that, a franchise was born. And while it exploded into the highest growing horror franchise of all time, raking in billions of doll hairs, the doll herself was not quite ready to step out of the spotlight. A year later, the John Leonetti directed spin-off, Annabelle, showed how the doll nearly destroyed a fictional family in the 60s, and how the doll made its way to the neurotic nurses from the opening of The Conjuring. That one made Warner Brothers $250 million richer. So in 2017, Lights Out director David F. Sandberg was trusted to direct a prequel, Annabelle Creation, where the doll gets a factory-fresh origin story that involves a grieving couple who takes in a school of orphans, and a demonic force that answers an invitation. You could look at it as an adaptation of Johnny Gruelles' Annabelle origin story that I talked about earlier, given that the real and fictional doll makers were both grieving the loss of a young daughter, but the similarities basically end there. It's pretty widely accepted that the mainline Conjuring films are based off of the Warrens' case files, while the spin-offs are just fictional stories branching off to give us more of the most popular villains. But given that many people would say that they are all fictional stories, is that such a crime?
What's wrong?
I have a sin to confess.
By the time we get to the 2019 sequel, Annabelle Comes Home, directed by Gary Doberman, the doll, or at least the demon behind it, has taken on the role of an inhuman ringleader who awakens the other haunted relics in the Warrens' artifact room. The evil entity Malthus releases ghostly samurai armor, a phantom hellhound, a murderous wedding dress, and a hellish ferryman, many of which have their own episodes of horror history. Malthus also becomes a Harry Potter Dementor for some reason. I actually think the Annabelle spin-offs get better as they go along, even if they do stray further and further from how the doll behaves according to the Warrens' case files. The Warrens' archives include hundreds of hours of voice recordings, along with written testimonies and photos documenting demonic transference into both people and objects. One especially disturbing case involved 98 separate entities pulled from a single victim, each with its own name, voice, and agenda. But that story is maybe not the most digestible for the average movie audience. The one area where I think the films shine the brightest in terms of doing the true story justice is the Warrens' Occult Museum. Tucked away in the basement of their Monroe, Connecticut home, the museum was packed wall to wall with cursed artifacts and ritual paraphernalia collected over decades of investigation.
This is not a Halloween room. This is the real thing. Okay. Many of the objects in this room here have had dire effects on people. People have been maimed, have been killed. People have wound up in mental institutions because of many of the things they write in this building here.
Every item was tagged and classified by spiritual threat level, like a TSA watch list for souvenirs collected from their paranormal investigations. They brought in people from the Christian church for regular cleansing. But none of these trinkets of terror were more dangerous or more closely guarded than the Annabelle doll itself, locked inside of its glass case.
So when you guys investigate these hauntings, how do you stop them from latching on to you?
We have to take great precaution.
With the doll and the demon residing in it locked up, you would think that would be the end of the story. But even as the movie franchise wound down, the real Annabelle had a renaissance of disturbing incidents. In a world that feels increasingly mapped out, measured, and explained by science, Annabelle represents something gloriously untamed and illogical. I think people are drawn to the story of Annabelle because the realm of the unknown is shrinking, and people miss it. There's some part of us that wants to feel like the world still has secrets. If the Warrens left behind any real legacy, it's this belief. I've seen it firsthand whenever I talk about this franchise. Whenever I suggest that I think the Warrens were more so good storytellers and less so actually making contact with demons, people become downright hostile in the comments. And that's super interesting to me. It's as if the belief in Annabelle is directly tied to the idea that the world is full of hidden corners and unseen forces. And to the credit of these anti-skeptics, once the authors, Ed and Lorraine, were out of the picture, the stories about Annabelle didn't stop coming. Ed passed away in 2006, done in by heart failure after years of declining health, just like Johnny Gruelles, the creator of the Raggedy Ann doll. Almost like this was a risk for anyone who presided over the doll. Lorraine continued working well into her 80s, but in 2019, at the ripe old age of 92, she followed her late husband into the afterlife. With both Warrens gone, the stewardship of their infamous museum fell into the hands of their daughter, Judy Warren, and her husband, Tony Spera, a former police officer who'd spent decades investigating hauntings and demonic phenomena with his in-laws as a member of the New England Society for Psychic Research, or NESPR, which Lorraine founded in 1952. Soon after Judy and Tony took the reins, the residential museum was forced to close its doors for good, shut down by local officials citing a litany of zoning violations. One thing the success of the Conjuring franchise had conjured was a near-endless parade of thrill-seeking tourists, all hoping to steal a glance at the real Annabelle doll and the other artifacts from the Warrens' cursed collection. Yeah, the Monroe, Connecticut neighborhood was cursed all right, cursed with gridlocked roads and obnoxious visitors. Safety concerns forced Judy and Tony to post no trespassing signs to keep strangers off the property. It's safe to say that Annabelle fever was at its peak during the late 2010s. Outside of the Conjuring franchise, the porcelain doll cameoed in James Wan's Aquaman in 2018, where she's seen chilling in the ocean, David F. Sandberg's Shazam in 2019, where she's on sale at a pawn shop, and later its sequel, Shazam Fury of the Gods in 2023, where she's a children's toy at a pediatrician's office. But the cloth doll version hadn't been forgotten either. While legal blockades kept her from being portrayed as a cursed doll, she does appear in Easter egg form in the background of all three Annabelle movies. There's a plush doll that kind of resembles her in The Curse of La Llorona, which came out in 2019, and in 2017 the doll was taken to Las Vegas for the filming of an episode of Ghost Adventures with Zak Bagans.
He has never allowed an investigation of Annabelle before on a television show. This is a historic moment for Annabelle and for us.
I just want to touch her so bad.
Whoa, our guy really is down bad. This investigation ended in feud when Bagans touched the doll without protection.
Don't touch the doll. Okay. Do not touch.
I bring all this up to illustrate that the real Annabelle was in the zeitgeist. There was demand to see her. And those people would be sent into a frenzy when Annabelle allegedly escaped. With the museum now off limits, seekers of the occult were left to their imaginations and shared hysteria on social media. In 2020, less than a year after the museum shut down, the rest of the educated world shut down during COVID. And if you were around during COVID, you'll remember that one of the many issues that plagued us during that time was people with too much time on their hands. In August of 2020, wild rumors swirled about the fate of the Warrens' most notorious artifact, none more feverishly debated than Annabelle, who many believed had escaped from her glass cage. As a refresher, 2020 was a year that seemed cursed from the very start. Outside of the pandemic, you had insane wildfires in Australia, stories of giant Asian murder hornets being discovered in the US, wild animals taking over cities, biblical locust swarms devouring parts of Africa and India, police brutality riots, the Karen public meltdown phenomenon, shortages on just about everything including toilet paper, and insane conspiracy theories about furniture retailers using storage cabinets to sell kids. 2020 basically felt like end times for the entire year, so when people heard that Annabelle had escaped from captivity, it seemed kind of believable. It all started during an interview to promote another James Wan horror movie, the backwards breakdancing slasher Malignant. Lead actress Annabelle Wallis, who ironically enough also played the lead in the first standalone Annabelle movie, mentioned working with Tom Cruise on the 2017 Mummy reboot. From the moment she signed on, her dream was to run alongside Cruise during one of the film's frantic, apocalyptic set pieces. This was the quote that she made. "He told me no at first. He said, nobody runs on screen with me, and I said, but I'm a really good runner. So I would time my treadmill so that he'd walk in and see me run. And then he added all these running scenes. It was like better than an Oscar. I was so happy that I got to run on screen with Tom Cruise." I don't know how this happens, but when Chinese media outlets got a hold of that quote, a mistranslation reportedly changed the bit about Annabelle Wallis running to Annabelle escaped, and people thought that the Annabelle doll had escaped from the Warren Museum. The error quickly went Wikipedia official, with the claim on the doll's page that she escaped from the Warrens Museum in the twilight hours of August 14, 2020. Social media, always eager to pour gasoline on a fire, exploded with wild theories, memes, and frantic warnings about the demon doll on the loose.
You guys think that 2020 cannot get any worse? The freaking Annabelle doll escaped.
Now from the top, make it drop. That's a wreck.
Annabelle the doll, the haunted doll, has left the museum she's supposed to be staying at. What?
Before the online rumor mill hit critical mass, Tony Spera ran damage control, posting a video filmed inside of the shuttered Warren Museum that effectively debunked the idea that Annabelle had gone rogue.
I don't know if you're going to want to hear this or not, but Annabelle did not escape. She didn't go anywhere. She didn't take a trip. She didn't fly first class, and she didn't go out to visit her boyfriend. Here she is. So let's put the rumors to rest, guys.
Which could be the truth, or he could have just thrown a random Raggedy Ann in there to save his reputation. It would not be a good look if he already let the evil doll escape just 1 year after Lorraine Warren passed away. The doll did eventually leave the museum, just not in the way that internet doomsayers had feared. And when she did, even more hysteria and disaster ensued. In 2021, under the sole supervision of the Warren son-in-law Tony Spera and his small team of paranormal investigators from the New England Society for Psychic Research, Annabelle began making public appearances. After receiving thousands of requests following the museum's closure, Spera made the difficult decision to make money. Spera made the difficult decision to take the doll on the road, as the centerpiece of sold-out paranormal conventions. Between 2021 and present day, the dolls appeared in places like Uncasville, Connecticut, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and San Antonio, Texas, where visitors could pay a few bucks to see the infamous this doll up close, along with other cursed artifacts from the Warrens' collection.
We're going to have artifacts from the Warrens Occult Museum, including the Annabelle doll here.
Spera insists that Annabelle can be viewed safely, so long as strict spiritual protocols involving prayer, holy water, and blessed relics are followed to the letter.
Lord, protect us from any evil, inhuman, or demonic entities that may surround this or infuse in this doll.
However, it did require moving Annabelle, sometimes outside of her case.
And just close it up fast. Close it up fast. That's good, Dad. That's good.
Tony chimes in with the "haven't you ever heard of closing the goddamn door?" People were quick to point out that Ed and Lorraine never would have allowed Annabelle to be removed from the case at all. Ed even left a big sign reading "Positively do not open."
I told you not to touch it!
Remember how I said that the mainline Conjuring films were adaptations of the Warrens' case files, but all of the spin-off movies were fictional? That's still true, but Annabelle Comes Home almost seems to be a case of life imitating art, because the movie is all about the consequences of not respecting Ed and Lorraine's rules for the artifact room, and that was exactly what was happening in 2022.
People say, well, you know, didn't you bring it to Las Vegas? But I know how to protect myself, and I'll tell you how I know. Ed showed me. He said, if you ever have to move the doll, the way to do it is this.
However, he didn't have to go film in Las Vegas. That was something that he chose to do. And unlike that Vegas trip, when Annabelle was just stuffed into a heavy-duty suitcase, this time they built a new enclosure that could be moved around and contained extra protections.
Behind this case is Ed's original case.
Right.
So I made this case since they closed the museum down because zoning reasons, and we decided, how could we still educate the public and let them know that evil does exist? So I built this traveling case here to house Annabelle.
The man tasked with encasing Annabelle, by the way, is Dan Rivera, a paranormal investigator and New England Society for Psychic Research member who has served as a consulting producer for the show 28 Days Haunted and produced the Annabelle Tour TikTok channel that was used to promote the Annabelle Tour. We'll get back to him. Spera viewed the public appearances as part of a larger mission to educate people about the spiritual world and preserve the legacy of his mystic mother-in-law. Whether you believe that or you think he was motivated by money is up to you to decide. But one thing was clear. Tony's handling of the paranormal artifacts that he and his wife had inherited was a lot less strict than when Ed and Lorraine were in charge. And it wouldn't take long for this new approach to incite disaster. While there were other paranormal investigators, perhaps looking to become the next Ed and Lorraine, who reported incidents with their own Annabelle dolls, what Tony Spera had was widely considered by paranormal enthusiasts to be the real thing. Sorry, whoever set up this roadside box in New Milford, Connecticut. In addition to sending Annabelle out for these meet and greets, 2022 also marked the beginning of a new trend where Annabelle would be ordering in. While opening the museum to the public had been banned, there was no rule about inviting someone over in private, which the paranormal YouTube channel Overnight benefited from when Tony granted them access to film in the room. Other channels would get their chance to peer through the glass over the next couple years, which mostly consist of Tony or Dan telling a little bit about the doll's history and the YouTubers claiming they can feel some bad energy or something. Of course, every year right around Halloween, the internet is abuzz with fresh speculation suggesting Annabelle has escaped, like this Redditor who thinks that the current Annabelle is a body double, or at least a doll double. But in 2025, Nesper announced the Devils on the Run tour, which would take Annabelle on the road starting May 8th in West Virginia and occurring sporadically throughout the year. The last stop planned, as of writing, is October 19th, 2025 in Kentucky. My friend Jiggy Saw Girl attended the May 14th event in New Orleans, and she described it to me as fun but a ripoff because they were charging $60 per person for the 30-minute session. And instead of telling the history of the doll, they basically just put you in a room and say, here she is. That's an expensive selfie.
They also said you are more than welcome to take pictures with Annabelle, which I tried to do, but it's like, what are you supposed to do, smile? Like, it's a demon.
I guess they did mention that some people brought a spirit box, and the demon residing in the doll was verbally assaulting the guests and addressing people by name, though there mysteriously doesn't seem to be any footage of this. So while this all seems like a nothing burger, just 3 days after the NOLA event, 11 inmates escaped from a nearby prison. Then, that same week, the largest sugarcane plantation in Louisiana went up in flames. Locals were quick to connect the dots, while tour organizers received death threats and urgent calls demanding that the doll be returned to Connecticut. The company that hosted the New Orleans event, Ghost City Tours, merely mocked the naysayers by posting this honestly kinda epic meme as a response. A couple weeks later, in June, there was yet another rumor of Annabelle's escape, this one claiming that she went missing on the way to Texas, or in some versions of the rumor, on the way to Chicago.
Tonight, demon doll fever gripping the internet with unfounded rumors that the infamous Annabelle doll went missing from its display case.
Hey, you remember this lady? Yeah, Lorraine Warren, when she said,
under no circumstances move the doll, touch the doll, or even look at the doll for too long. But no, you dodo brains decided to put it on tour!
Not only was there reports about Annabelle the doll mysteriously missing, but this is where it gets even more worser.
Side note, has anyone noticed that practically all of these clickbait paranormal pundits speak in double comparatives? Not that I'm suggesting a correlation or anything. The rumors got so out of control that Tony had to address them with a series of posts.
It's easy for rumors to start. The fact of the matter is that doll was never out of our sight, never out of our control. It's in a protective case that many precautions were taken to make it safe.
Though I'm sure he wasn't too beaten up about all of the free publicity for his tour. Not that I'm suggesting that the viral Annabelle is missing story from 2020 caused him to spark the rumors again when it could financially benefit him. However, the fun part of the video ends there. As the tour continued throughout the summer, the team was in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania for the July 11 through July 13 showings of the Annabelle doll. But on the last day in the Keystone State, Dan Rivera, the man responsible for handling the infamous doll, told his colleagues that he was feeling sick and decided to go back to the hotel room. That would be the last time that they ever saw him alive. When they returned to the room later that day, he was unresponsive. Local police officers noted that there was nothing unusual or suspicious at the scene, but somehow the seemingly healthy 54-year-old was no longer, thanks to what they describe as natural causes. As spooky as the details might seem, I feel like it would be irresponsible to draw a line between a real and recent incident and the other stuff that I have described in this video. But I also feel like it would be weird not to mention that this happened. So I'm just gonna speak objectively here. There are certain people who feel that the doll and the tour are to blame for what happened. These people probably saw the fact that Dan was the one who built the casing that they believe is trapping in a dark entity who wants to get out, thus making him a likely target. They may have also heard his stories over the years, which play up the idea that there is danger in working with the doll.
Well, I'm at a red light at a four-way intersection.
Yeah.
Not paying attention with the traffic lights. My car did not move, but all three cars from all the other directions came right into me.
What?
Totaled my car. I mean, blew out the windows, everything. I walked out of that accident without a scratch, and that was my first experience with this doll because I moved her. And then there was other times when I moved this doll, I would lose another car. My wife told me, said, Dan, have you noticed that every time you move this doll, you lose a vehicle?
While some people on the internet are leaving distasteful comments, the press release from Nesper is respectful and highlights what Dan meant to his family and friends. Ghost Hunter star Jason Hawes posted a statement on Facebook. What's even harder to see right now are the posts blaming his death on things like the Annabelle doll and attacking places like ghostly images of Gettysburg tours and other locations for having the event. That needs to stop. His family shouldn't have to read that kind of nonsense while they're grieving. Maybe the people sending hate to Dan's coworkers would have understood better if he had just told them that they're making the situation more worse. This story is kind of insane. There's so much misinformation and disinformation out there on what really happened and who said what about the incident. Sorting out all the online fanfare surrounding it could be the subject of its own video, but I ultimately realized it's pointless, because the people who believe that Annabelle's supernatural influence is responsible for an army vet's demise alone in a hotel room are probably never going to change their minds, even if the autopsy report is eventually released. Whatever the cause ends up being, they'll probably just say that Annabelle did it. And that was where this episode of Horror History was supposed to end, but comedian Matt Rife had other ideas.
Hey guys, super random but incredible announcement. I have just bought the Ed and Lorraine Warren's Home and Occult Museum with my very good friend Elton Castee. We are the legal guardians and caretakers of all 750 haunted artifacts and items in the Warren Museum, including the Annabelle doll. I must go on record and say we do not legally own the items, but we are the legal guardians and caretakers of the items for at least the next 5 years. And what this means for you guys is you are going to soon be able to book a night or a weekend and stay at the Warrens' house and investigate the house and the history of the house, as well as the museum and all the artifacts inside of it.
Okay, well, no one saw that coming. The announcement was made on August 1st, 2025, in the midst of the ongoing Devils on the Run tour, and no one really knew what it meant until Rife clarified in the comments. It would operate as an Airbnb for the time being until they eventually opened up their own museum in a new location. I guess with the zoning restrictions placed on the museum in 2019, this was the only path forward to make money off of the artifacts other than taking them on tour. This would be a lot cheaper than touring. Some people were also speculating that Tony Spera and company were essentially cashing out on the Warren legacy because of what happened to Dan Rivera, but during a live stream, it was mentioned that the sale was in the works before his passing.
This has been worked out for like the last 4 months. I just want to make it just so extremely clear that this wasn't like Dan passed away, and this was all in the works before any of that.
And while Rife does seem like a random name to take up the mantle of Annabelle's legal guardian, whatever that means because you can't be the guardian of an object, the 29-year-old funny man has always had an interest in the paranormal. He's actually appeared in over 40 videos on the Overnight channel dating back to 2021, where he appears as a gay stripping bellhop for some reason.
You have any mail? Welcome to Hotel Cecil, where guests check in and things get a little bit
That was weird. It also makes sense for someone like Rife to take over, because as belief in the paranormal has grown, Tony Spera and his team have been dealing with increasing amounts of backlash from people who are afraid of the demon supposedly residing inside the Annabelle doll, which reached a boiling point after the tragic death of Dan Rivera. But as a comedian, Rife is no stranger to controversy, and usually invites it, like in 2023 when he addressed the audience who were ruffled by his offensive jokes by offering to sell them special needs helmets.
How could he say something like that? Cancel Matt Rife!
But he wasn't the only one taking over the museum. He was joined by Elton Castee. Elton also started his entertainment career in comedy, finding an audience on Vine, which was like TikTok, but the videos were only 6 seconds. He was known for jumping into fountains and splashing people, but this is also where he would have his first experience with dolls that send people into a frenzy.
Happy anniversary!
That's it.
Squeeze it!
It's over. You gained weight. I made out with your mom.
What?
He'd bring the teddy bear scares back for his first video, or at least his oldest public video, on his YouTube channel, T-Fill, or the F It List. The goal was to do something crazy and different each day. Over time, that became a lot of overnight challenges, some of which were at spooky locations. This led him to eventually rebrand a side channel into a T-Fill spin-off, which became Overnight. See, it all comes together when you look into the history. The ghost hunting duo says the Airbnb will start taking reservations in summer 2026, which is sure to kick up a storm of controversy, videos, and new chapters to this story. But the very announcement of the sale itself has already shed some light on some familial contention. Not about who Tony and Judy sold the house to, but about who they didn't sell to. You see, Judy Warren was not the end of Ed and Lorraine's bloodline. They actually had 2 grandkids, a boy named Chris McKinnell and a girl who is not a public figure. They were the children of Judy and her first husband, Graham, but she remarried to Tony when Chris was 19 years old. You'd be forgiven for not knowing about Chris though. He's not in any Conjuring movie or spin-off, which are all set well before he was born, and he doesn't have any online activity or any activity in the paranormal community that I could find before 2014. That was the year that he and his grandma Lorraine founded the Warren Legacy Foundation for Paranormal Research. Now, you may be wondering, what is the difference between the New England Society for Paranormal Research and the Warren Legacy Foundation for Paranormal Research? That is a question that I don't have an answer for. I don't see what the difference is. But just making an inference, it seems like maybe Chris McKinnell didn't get along super well with his father-in-law Tony, and the Warren Legacy thing was Lorraine's gift to her grandson, allowing him to have something connected to the valuable Warren family name, since she had already given the artifacts to Judy and Tony. It was founded a year after The Conjuring cleaned up at the box office, after all. There seems to be some animosity from Chris towards Tony.
I do not own the doll. I am not responsible for the doll. The doll belongs to my mother and her husband, Tony Spera. We have nothing to do with one another. Tony is a man who doesn't really understand the paranormal. He interviewed my grandparents, he helped them on lectures, but he's never worked on a case in his life.
Chris started his social media accounts in 2020 under the name The Warren Files, and often posted about Annabelle, but obviously didn't have access to Annabelle itself, instead opting to do podcasts. Without access to the artifacts, none of it really took off, even when he chased the trends.
Hysteria is dangerous. The Labubu dolls are not dangerous, but we can create something inhuman and dangerous if we believe in it.
But 2025 was a tipping point for him. He claims he started getting attacked for his father-in-law's reckless actions with the doll when all the chaos started happening during the Devil's on the Run tour, forcing him to speak out against his family. In an Instagram post on May 22, Chris McKinnell came out with his feelings towards the Devil's on the Run tour. This breaks my heart. Annabelle is currently being taken on a tour across the US, a decision made by Tony Spera. I want to be very clear, I am not involved with this, nor do I support it. I do not work with him or associate with him. My grandparents, Ed and Lorraine Warren, dedicated their lives to helping people suffering from real and terrifying experiences. I carry on their legacy, not with tours or theatrics, but by continuing to help people all over the world who are haunted, hurting, or afraid. So he wasn't happy about the tour due to his ideological divide between himself and Tony. Where Tony is not afraid to sensationalize, or at least lean into sensationalization, Chris seems to see the danger of riling people up.
Don't ascribe godlike powers to this thing. Treat it more like a cobra. It can affect you if you're open to it.
Okay, so that brings us back up to speed. News of the Matt Rife purchase broke on August 2nd, 2025, and that same day, Chris made a statement on his social media accounts. I've kept quiet as long as I could, maybe longer than I should have. Over the years, I've become increasingly estranged from my family due to deep differences in how we view and preserve the legacy of my grandparents, Ed and Lorraine Warren. At the heart of that distance is a sincere disagreement over how sacred this work truly is, and how it should be handled with reverence, not publicity. Let me be clear, I have nothing against Matt Rife. I didn't know who he was until a few days ago. I believe his intentions are good, and I don't hold him responsible for the decisions that led to this moment. But for me, this is deeply personal. I don't know what comes next, but I know I couldn't stay silent. This legacy matters. It's not a brand, it's not content, it's not entertainment. It's sacred. And I think whether or not you believe in the paranormal, it's possible to agree with that statement. Because through the Warrens' legacy, the movies, and even the artifacts in the tour, it's clear that these stories mean a lot to everyone who is invested in them. Chris seems pretty pessimistic about the sale, and it's not hard to wonder if some of that comes from a place of jealousy, believing he could have been the eventual heir. Although he claims his feelings come from a desire to respect his grandparents' legacy, more than one thing can be true at once. He makes podcasts, sells merchandise, and takes donations, so he can't really criticize anyone for making money off the Warren name. But sure, I'll let him rip into how tactfully that money is extracted from the pockets of paranormal believers. Rife and Castee's Airbnb is not even open yet, and they're already selling $45 loot boxes, and as of writing, have already done 12 hours of streaming inside of the house. On the bright side, if Annabelle gives the new owners any trouble, Elton can do a cannonball into a vat of holy water, and the Annabelle demon should be splashed back into obedience. So what did I learn from untangling the entire history of Annabelle? To me, the scariest part about her story isn't the demon or the doll or even the horror movies that spawned from all of this. It's the moments that a person hands over agency by accepting that paranormal forces control their fate. When logic fractures and doubt slips in and a person finds his or herself wondering, what if it's true? It doesn't matter if you believe in otherworldly forces or not. It's the mystery of what cannot be explained that made Ed and Lorraine's stories so effective. The reason that the Conjuring franchise has resonated with so many millions of people. I wouldn't be surprised if the upcoming fourth Conjuring ends on a mysterious note with the doll sitting in the Warrens' basement. Because Annabelle's true power doesn't come from what's inside her. It comes from what's inside us. If you love horror, make sure to subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring the death bell, and select all notifications so you don't miss an upload, and I will see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.